Hello there, this is Chinuke Fawali and I welcome you to Parenting in Diaspora. Today we're going to be discussing cultural identity issues among immigrant families. For most of us who have migrated from the different countries that we came from, this is not an issue. Most of us are quite confident in identity. We know exactly who we are, there's no problem. It's not the same with our children who are either born or raised in the diaspora. They are conflicted a lot of times. Who am I really? Am I from that culture? Am I from this culture? Am I both? And it's really a very important matter to them. A lot of research has been done on immigrant families and also in Australia, which is considered to be one of the most diverse countries of the world. And what researchers found is that when a child is able to fully connect and belong to the various cultures that are his or hers, then they really fare better. They are better with their mental health. Just their overall well-being is enhanced by being able to engage in both cultures. One of my nephews asked his father one day, who am I really? Am I American or Nigerian? And I think his father gave the most correct answer. You are 100% Nigerian and 100% American. And that's exactly what we're saying. When our children belong to different cultures, they need to be able to fully identify with each of these cultures. What usually happens is that our children adopt the culture of where they live, so it's not a problem. They're quite familiar with that culture. The culture that suffers is the one where we have come from, where our children don't live in, so it's easy for them not to be connected. And that's where the work is. So how do we preserve the culture that our children may not know or may not remember because they don't live in it? We can preserve our cultures by the values that we pass on to our children, the names we give to them, our dressing, our food, our language, which I've beaten that horse to death, so I'm not going to say much about that. Talking about values, I know that in my culture, the Nigerian culture, we put a lot of emphasis on greeting. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, goodbye. And when we teach our children that way, when we teach them to greet people, it really helps them when they get outside, when they get to school, when other people might not be, saying hello to the teacher. If they can, say good morning to the teacher, good afternoon, even in the workplace, it really gives our children favor because they're considered to be courteous, and that's a positive attribute. And that's the same with many of the values that we have. So we shouldn't drop those values simply because we're in another place. Those positive values actually follow our children. So today I'm actually going to concentrate on names, the names that we give our children. I think it's important for us to give our children native names because that reminds them of who they are as many times as they hear their names. And we need to let them know why we name them the names and the meaning of their names. And I know that in the beginning it's not going to be easy when they're young because the names will sound different from the names of all the people around them and they may feel that they'll be ridiculed. I remember my son, I think he has one of the most difficult names out of all our children, Buluaga. But he told us that, once I let my friends know the meaning of my name, they let me alone. My name is Magnify the Lord. So thankfully he had friends that, had regard for God, so they just stopped laughing at him. But we used to tell our children that, children will laugh at one another for anything, not just because of your name. They'll laugh at you because of the way you walk, because of the way you talk, because of how you look, different reasons that people can laugh at you. So even if you had a mainstream name, that doesn't mean you won't be laughed at. And so we used to tell them, if you became a very important person, people will have to say your name and they'll say it well, so don't worry about that. So we just have to keep encouraging them. But surely as they grow older, they really begin to appreciate their names, especially when they know the meaning. President Obama, before he went to Kenya, he went by Barry, even though his name was Barack. But once he went to Kenya and met the rest of his family members, met a lot of people that bore the same name, just got introduced to his culture, accepted his culture, he came back to America bearing the name Barack. And you would think that maybe connecting with his Kenyan roots will make him less American, but it did quite the opposite. Connecting with his Kenyan roots actually made him a more confident American to the extent that he was able to vie for and win the presidency of the United States. And so that just underscores the fact that when our children are well connected, well grounded, have a good sense of belonging in all their cultures, it really gives them confidence even where they live. Over the weekend, I had a chance of chatting with one of my young friends. I've known him since he was a child. We had a very interesting discussion about this particular topic, so I'm going to let you listen in. Hey, John. Well, Ife, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a few years, and I've always called you John. I know that your name is also Ife, but I saw you today introducing yourself to everybody. I'm Ife, and I was like, okay. It looks like you now go by Ife. So can you tell us how that change happened and what happened in the past that you went by John, and why are you now changing to your African name?
Sure, yeah. So I was born in Lagos, in Nigeria. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 3, and by I say I moved, my family moved, to Los Angeles when I was 3 years old. And I think that it was part of the transitioning process. It was the first time my parents had been in the United States. We were in a very energetic, fast-paced city, and my parents wanted me to have the best opportunities. And so from a very early age, they started calling me John, because John is my Christian English name. It's on my birth certificate, it's on all my documentation.
It's your name.
It's my name. And in public, they would refer to me as John, introduce me as John. At home, they always call me Ife Oluwani. My full name is Ife Oluwani John Olawore. And so throughout life, people knew me as John from a very early age, and that's the name that I knew, and I saw no issue with it. I realized very quickly that I had my identity tied into the John of me, which was the American side of me, or whatever I thought it meant to be an American John. A few years ago, I started to really consider and think and say, who am I? Or who do I want to be? What kind of brand do I want for myself? I realized that in my workplace, in my business partners, all of them openly embraced who they were, their cultures, their backgrounds, and by then designed their names. And a lot of my family friends and cousins who also had similar cultural backgrounds as me, one of my cousins, Taya or Tokwe, a lot of individuals, the only name I knew them by were their Nigerian names. And I realized that on the one hand, John was my name, but when I was wanting to do a rebrand of myself, I realized that I needed to adopt the Ife Oluwani side of me. Ife Oluwani could be the will of God or the love of God, depending on how you translate it.
That's true.
And about 18 months ago, I decided that I needed to rebrand myself as a professional. And part of that rebrand also meant that I wanted to rebrand myself as a husband. And though John also means love or the beloved, I realized that if I started going by the name that was on my birth certificate, the full name, the Ife Oluwani, every time I heard that, it would trigger a signal to me to act in love, to act the way that God would will for me. And so I realized that it was going to be very important for me to adopt that quickly. And as I did, it became easier and easier. Everyone that I knew, they figured it out. They knew how to say my name. They asked what it meant. I was able to tell a short story about what God was doing in my life and what He was able to do in other people's life through me.
So really, because your name had a meaning, you wanted that meaning to be known and for it to reflect in your life.
Exactly.
So your other friends that were comfortable in their names, what different cultures were they from?
I have other friends who have come from Latinx cultures. I have quite a few individuals from Mexico, a few people from Nordic countries. Okay. And so a lot of them, like I said, because that was the only name they knew, they never had to adjust or change. Okay. So quite a few different varieties, but a majority would be Yoruba, Nigerian.
Okay. So what advice would you have for people that are still struggling with their names, that are probably changing their names or making it sound, American or English or just something so that maybe they will fit in or they'll be comfortable or people can say their names? What advice do you have for them, or what do you have to say?
I think it's a personal challenge, something that has to be dealt with individually. I hesitate to give an overarching word of advice. The one thing that I can say is whatever you decide, you need to stick with it. It's very important to be consistent, because if I'm introducing myself as Ife to half the people I meet and half the people I meet I'm introducing myself as John, it not only causes confusion for the people I meet, but it also causes confusion and conflict for myself. I do understand the challenge of having a name that has a stronger tie to one's culture that may not be as readily accepted by the culture that you're in. But I think if you understand what your name is, if you agree with it and you want to be aligned with that meaning, it's going to instill a sense of confidence in you to continue using that name that you've been given. Whatever it is, whatever background it is. Understand the meaning, understand why it is your name, and be consistent with it as you decide which way to go.
All right. Awesome, Ife. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again.